All right, let's be real for a sec. Tackling Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit, it's a lot, right? Dense, complex, makes even like philosophy pros scratch their heads. But don't worry, that's what we're here for. We're your shortcut to phenomenology and why it still matters, believe it or not. Got excerpts straight from the text and some seriously insightful commentary from the translator's intro, so we're getting like a multi-layered thing going right away.
You know, what grabs me about the phenomenology is it's not just arguments on a page, it's an experience. Hegel, he takes you on a journey, consciousness trying to get itself and the world figured out.
So hold on, instead of straight up lecturing us,
Yeah.
Hegel's like a guide through these different stages. Is that what you're saying?
Boom, nailed it. And get this, the translators, they call him a psychoanalyst of culture, which I love.
Oh, snap. Like Freud analyzing a painting.
Kinda. Just like a therapist unpacks a patient's mind, Hegel's diagnosing the hang-ups, the contradictions, and how we think, how we see the world.
Okay, love that analogy.
Yeah.
But how's he actually do this psychoanalysis thing? What's the method?
Well, first things first, you can't just skip to the answer with Hegel. He's not about that. He actually warns against that, straight up says, an undertaking hasn't run its full course in its purpose, but in being carried through. The journey's the point, you know what I mean?
All right, so no skimming allowed. Got to really get in there, get our hands dirty with the process to even get it, which I'm guessing is why he's not a fan of, like, old school philosophy.
Bingo. You're picking this up fast. See, Hegel, he thought traditional philosophy was too obsessed with these absolute, unchanging truths. And to make it even clearer, he compares it to picture this, a monochromatic painting. Can you imagine?
Oh, man, that's rough. One color. Talk about boring.
Right. Hegel's saying reality's not like that. It's more like constantly shifting, multidimensional. To get that, you need a different kind of thinking, what he calls conceptualization.
Conceptualization. Sounds a little intimidating, gotta say. Break that down for us regular folks. What's it actually mean?
Million-dollar question gets to the heart of why Hegel matters. It's not just logic, not the way we usually think of it. It's about how concepts themselves, the ideas, they evolve through this back and forth, this negation and contradiction.
Hold up, negation. Isn't that a bad thing? Like, just saying no all the time.
Yeah, not quite. Hegel's got layers, man. Negation for him, it's more subtle. It's like recognizing we never get the full picture, and it's by hitting those limits that we get closer to truth. Think about it. You learn by messing up, right? Finding out what doesn't work. That's negation pushing you along.
Okay. Gears are turning now. So if old school philosophy is too stuck, how do we break free? How do we actually do this conceptualization thing? What's the secret handshake?
This is where it gets juicy. Hegel says, and I'm paraphrasing, consciousness itself, it has this internal BS detector. It's always checking itself, how its perceptions line up with the world, looking for cracks in its own thinking.
So consciousness is kind of self-critical, always testing, refining its own understanding. That's wild.
You got it. He writes, consciousness provides its criterion from within. It's all about self-reflection, questioning our assumptions, and that's what leads to a truer picture of reality, according to Hegel at least.
Okay, so we've established that Hegel is not playing around. He's here to shake things up. But he's also giving us tools, ways to actually use these ideas. We were talking about conceptualization and this whole negation thing. How's that actually work in the phenomenology? What's he doing with that?
Well, Hegel lays out these different shapes of consciousness, basically, ways that we try to grasp reality. And a biggie for him is this split between the inner world, our thoughts, and the outer world, like our actual experience.
Right, the classic philosophical headache, is it all in here, or is there something real out there? Where's Hegel land on that?
He's not about that clean break, that separation. He uses this example so good of a magnet. You can't have one pole without the other, right? They're tied together, defined by that opposition.
So it's not even just that they're connected, but they depend on each other to make sense at all.
Exactly. And that whole back and forth, things finding their meaning through relationships, that's core to Hegel. You can't just analyze something in isolation. You got to see how it fits in the whole picture.
Okay, now that makes me think of negation again. It's not just saying nope. It's about how things are shaped by what they're not, by their limits.
There you go. And the most famous example, the one that's really stuck around, is the master-slave thing. It's probably heard of it, but it's often like oversimplified.
Yeah, like just a power struggle.
Yeah.
Right. But there's more to it.
Way more. It's not just two dudes fighting. It's about the very nature of self-consciousness, how we even understand ourselves as individuals.
Okay, so break that down. How does this master-slave thing say something bigger about us?
So the master, right, trying to be all dominant, control the slave, Hegel says they actually become dependent on them. The master needs the slave's recognition, their labor, to even feel like a master.
Whoa, so it's like the more power you try to grab, the more you need others to validate it.
Exactly. But the slave, through their work, their struggle, they develop a different kind of awareness. They see their own power, how their actions shape the world, even if it's not on the surface.
That's deep. So the slave, through being pushed down, actually gets a depth the master might miss.
Hegel writes, this truth consisting in sheer negativity, meaning that experience of being defined as not the master has in fact been internalized by servitude. That struggle, that's what leads to a real sense of self.
Okay, see, now that's the psychoanalysis part, clicking for me. Hegel's finding these hidden tensions in something we think is simple power, but it's way more complex.
And that's his whole thing. He wants us to see these dialectical relationships, this push and pull everywhere.
Not just masters and slaves, but how we understand ourselves compared to others, to society, the whole shebang.
Bingo. And that takes us to another shape of consciousness, this one he calls observational consciousness.
Observational. Lay it on us. What's that about?
Imagine someone trying to figure out the world just by watching, categorizing, like a scientist with their data. That's observational consciousness. Wants the laws of reality, but misses the forest for the trees, you know?
So like head down, too focused on the details to see the big picture.
And Hegel says that's limited because it doesn't get how interconnected everything is. Stuck on the surface, seeing what happens, but not the deeper why.
Like trying to understand a song, just by looking at the sheet music, you got the notes, but not the feeling, the whole point.
Perfect analogy. And this is where it gets really relevant to us now. Think about how much our world runs on data, stats, trying to measure everything.
True, we're drowning in information, but it doesn't always feel like more understanding, you know?
Right. And Hegel reminds us that real understanding, it takes more than just looking and analyzing. It's about engaging with the world in a way that sees those connections, the whole messy, beautiful web of it all.
I'm getting like a brain upgrade over here. But to really install this Hegel software, how does it work in, the real world? Not just inside our heads.
Yeah. Hegel is big on this, how these different shapes of consciousness connect to, like, ethical life, how we function as a society, not just individuals.
So it's not enough to figure out my own deal. It's about how that fits into the whole social political mess.
You got it. He even says reason, as it immediately appears in the world of actuality, is an individual, meaning our very ability to reason, to be ethical, it's always shaped by the society we're in.
Okay, so how's that play out practically? Give us an example we can relate to.
He uses words like gifts, capabilities, powers, stuff that could be good or bad, depends on the person and how they use it within society.
Dude, that's so relevant right now.
Yeah.
This whole debate about talent versus responsibility, privilege, the ethics of being rich or powerful, it's like Hegel saw this coming.
Totally. And he's showing how those things, even good ones on the surface, can get messed up if it's just about personal gain. You got to factor in the community, the needs of everyone.
So being a good person isn't enough if you're not thinking about the whole system, how your actions ripple out. Right?
Exactly. He's pushing back against that individualistic thing, saying we got to be more socially engaged to be truly ethical. It's all connected.
Man, this has been mind-blowing. From how Hegel thinks to these big, juicy concepts. But I gotta be honest, kind of nervous about going back to the real world and trying to apply all this. Like, do I need to be analyzing every thought now?
Haha. Well, I don't think that's the point. Remember, for Hegel, the journey is the destination. It's not about some final answer. It's the constant questioning, the refining how we see things.
So more about the process, the becoming, than having it all figured out.
Nailed it. And it never really ends, which honestly is kind of freeing. Hegel says, and get a load of this, what's here alleged to be a fixed, enduring law can exist only as an integral moment. Basically, even laws are always in motion.
Whoa. Okay, my brain's a little fried. Even laws aren't stable.
It's a lot. But it's liberating, too. We're not stuck in these rigid definitions. There's always room to grow, change, see things in new ways.
I dig that. So the takeaway from Hegel isn't a rule book, but permission to stay curious. Keep pushing those limits of how we understand stuff.
I love that. And who knows, maybe that is Hegel's absolute knowledge, not the end point, but that constant journey of figuring it out.
Well, I feel like I'm at the start of a very long, very interesting hike. Huge thanks for being our guide on this Hegel deep dive. This has been incredible.
The pleasure was all mine. And to everyone listening, hold on to those Hegelian insights. You never know when they might come in handy.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Until next time, keep those minds sharp and those conversations flowing.